Minister Humphreys has visited Roscommon and Galway on multiple occasions. And the reason why is because so many projects have received funding from the Department of Rural and Community Development. So many projects have benefited from CLOR, Towns and Villages, the Community Centres Fund, project development measures, measures and innovative policies that have been brought in as well that have made a difference. And what we want to see is that communities say that they want to live and work in rural areas, that in your local town, in a small town or a small village, that there's supports there, there's amenities there. That's what it's all about. And what you've achieved in the last 4 or 5 years, you talk to any councillors, they have not seen this level of funding in many, many years. And you hear this anytime, in places you go around the country, I'm sure. And I suppose I want to pay tribute just to your dedication in terms of meeting those groups. You are always a smiling face, full of enthusiasm and energy. We would have 6 or 7 different events in one day. And of course, I'd be trying to jam-pack probably more in. But Minister, every single time you greeted people and you were interested to speak, to hear their stories, to hear what was happening in the community centre. I can tell you that in Moore Community Centre, they had Virgin Media there last week. They got funding and investment of over 200,000. They were down there doing Fit Farmer, and they had the Movement Mentor, and Virgin Media were down there seeing people doing exercise classes in their brand new community centre. There's communities and people that benefit from the fact that they're able to have these services happening nearby. We talk about it and we say that there's this million here and that million there, but what it actually means is that potentially you could have an early childcare service in a community centre. You could have someone there to do after school in a community centre. You can have training classes, exercise classes. You can roll out our connected hubs, of course, and your connected hubs funding. That there's places there for people to work and to do that close to home. And those are things that you've achieved. And that I, for one, as a member of Fine Gael, I'm so proud each and every time that I've been able to show you what you've achieved in terms of your department and what's been done. So I just want to say that, of course, you've represented your community. I'm sure Cavan Monaghan and Cootehill, as you've mentioned, there's a lot of sad faces there today, and I can well understand why. I just want to mention that you have transformed, of course, these communities through what you've done. But to me in particular, you've looked at, in CLOR in particular, you looked at Meals on Wheels, particularly coming out of the pandemic, and how we could support Meals on Wheels services. That benefited, for example, Ballinasloe Social Services that provided meals to CLOR areas, both in Roscommon and Galway, up to a 10-20k radius. You've done things like emergency buses, for bringing people for treatment. How important is that when we live in areas where there's no bus services, and when you need to go for chemo, radiation treatment, particularly we have people living really long, active and healthy lives, but sometimes they need help along the way, and help along the way has been able to get the bus to bring you in to get your treatment in a timely way and urgently when it's needed. I suppose to me, I know that you've got to visit really lovely locations, and I hope when you have time now with your family, you'll get to go back and maybe relax and enjoy them more. I know, like for Strokestown, we were there when we had the brand new investment into Strokestown for the National Famine Museum, and of course that was excellent. You've been to rugby clubs in Ballinasloe for walking tracks. Hopefully you'll get to walk around some of them now as well. But you've done so much, I think, that's going to have a huge impact. And I think now, and in time, the time that you will have, that you'll get to visit again, and you'll get to really enjoy it again. Just in the Department of Social Protection, for me, in the rural areas I'm in, and in my constituency office, one of the biggest things is fuel allowance. That is the one that I get, literally people walking in the door, we have signs up, and I kept telling people, do you know, a few years ago, we've expanded it for over 70s. Because somebody would say, well, I may not be eligible. I have people at 75, 80 coming in, challenges with costs, the pension isn't covering this, that, and the other. And literally the fact that they now get up to 1,000 for a couple, and I know this probably changes again from the most recent budget, but that was expanded for over 70s, made a huge impact. Like I said, we have people, I think I had a figure from the census in a commencement earlier this morning, that there's been a 40% increase of people over 65 since 2013 to 2022. And that we are seeing now that there's going to be an increase for people over 65. It's up to 800,000 now. We're going to have 1.5 million people in Ireland over the age of 65 by 2050. So it's going to be a huge increase. You mentioned, of course, that carers, I think one of the changes that I really liked in the budget this time is that now carers can apply for the fuel allowance. I think that's a really important measure, I think, for carers as well, recognition of the work that they do. And of course, all of these groups, once they're eligible for fuel allowance, can apply for the retrofit. And I'm just reminding, if there's anyone listening out there on fuel allowance, to apply for retrofitting programmes through the SEAI. As a spokesperson for education for Fine Gael here in the Shannon, I want to acknowledge the work, particularly on the hot school meals. I know Senator Gareth Ahern here has spoken about that, but I have seen it. I have seen principals who are overjoyed. So many that wanted to get in on the pilot scheme when you ran it last year. It's incredible to think we only had 30 schools 5 years ago, and that went up to 2,000 schools, and that your intent through the budget this year was that we were going to see all schools having like hot school meals by the end of 2025. And you've also put a hunger pilot in place as well, you know, for schools, particularly to look at vulnerable areas. All I can say is that, yeah, the kids are delighted. I think the fact that you can bring ovens and storage areas into schools, you've made it practical, accessible, and I think that has been one of the proud achievements that we've seen in government here over the last number of years. I also want to just acknowledge the Community Recognition Fund. There are many communities that have welcomed new families into Ireland, and there has been a recognition of what they've done there, and that can be supports, local supports. I know it can be playgrounds, but particularly around childcare. And we saw over $500,000 for the Growing Tree 2 childcare facility in Ballagherine. That was an amazing investment, because one of the things I see at the moment is 3-year waiting lists for childcare. We need to see how we use those funds and how local authorities apply and use those community recognition funds in a way that benefits areas like childcare, like family resource centres, which is what we're struggling and what we don't have at the moment. So Minister, in your time that you've left, I hope that you will call for those types of events or those types of funding for family resource centres, for childcare, and how we best use the Community Recognition Fund. But I know that there is no end to your energy and enthusiasm. I am sure that is not going to change, and no one's going to tell me otherwise, because I've seen it. And I just hope that I have the benefit of getting to show you again in a more relaxed way, perhaps this time, when you do come to visit again in Roscommon and Galway, and just very much appreciate everything that you've done for our counties. And I know I speak for many councillors across the country. They've really enjoyed having you come to visit the last few years. Gar míle mágad.